Former West Virginia State Senator Richard Ojeda has decided to drop out of the 2020 race. Now, I had a lot of hope for Ojeda. I thought even if he wasn't going to, become the nominee for the Democratic Party in 2020, I thought he would help change the conversation, especially once he got to the debate stage, since he's very vocal about pushing back against big moneyed interests and actually representing people and especially unions. But he decided to drop out, and he posted this video.
Hey everybody, when I was a kid in grade school, my teachers always said that anyone can grow up and become president. And unfortunately, what I'm starting to realize is that unless you have wealth, influence, and power, it's not going to happen. Unfortunately, we've made the decision that we're going to end this presidential campaign because I can't see continuing to ask people to donate when I can't get no FaceTime. I don't want to see people, send money to a campaign that's probably not going to get off the ground. So I just want each and every one of you all to know that my fight is not over. I'm going to continue being a voice, and I'm not done. I'm not done. I may not be able to continue on in this presidential race, but I can assure you that the only thing I've ever wanted to do was to try to help people. I think that whoever does win the presidency needs to be somebody who is willing to check Big Pharma, who understands that we have got to find the jobs of the future, who understands how important it is to look out for the working class citizens and support our unions so that all working class citizens can have a voice at the table, and that's important. So thank you very much for your support. Sappers clear the way, airborne all the way.
Now, I was a little surprised by this. I thought Ojeda would stay in the race a little longer, at least make it to a debate stage. But this video, I think, makes Ojeda even more likable. It shows that he was not in this for himself. He didn't want people sending him money if he didn't feel like he could win the nomination in 2020. And that's commendable. So all the credit in the world for to Ojeda for being honest and dropping out of this race before he took any more money. But I want to mention, hit on some of the points here that Ojeda mentioned. He talked about his inability to really gain traction because he didn't have the wealth, influence, and power needed. I think that the biggest barrier for figures that don't already have a national profile is obviously name recognition. So when you look at Bernie Sanders in 2015 and 2016, he was able to slowly gain name recognition over the course of a couple years. And that was in large part because of his message, but also because there wasn't a real challenge to Hillary Clinton except Bernie Sanders. So with a field that is so crowded the way it is now, it's a lot tougher to be able to get your name out there when you are one of like 30 candidates that are potentially running in 2020. So apart from the initial attention that Ojeda got when he first announced from MSNBC and CNN, they never covered him since. Even though he was out there supporting unions, he was in California supporting the teacher strike. That stuff doesn't get national attention unless you already have a very recognizable name. Unless you already have name recognition, the media is not going to cover you. So Ojeda was just stuck in a weird spot where he wasn't able to get the attention he needed to be able to continue pushing his message out there and raise his profile, because he was basing his campaign on small individual donations. So if you don't have the ability to get your name out there, it's going to be hard to raise the money if you aren't taking big money. And it's a good thing Ojeda was not taking big money, but you understand the catch-22 here, where you want to raise your profile and become a strong potential candidate, but in order to do that, you need the money. But to get the money, you have to sell out. So if you don't want to sell out, it's really hard to do it unless, as I said, you are someone like Bernie Sanders, like one of the only candidates to run against Hillary Clinton, and you already are a senator, or that's the only scenario. So it's hard to get your name out there unless you already have a national profile and the ability to raise small individual contributions. Now, Ojeda here mentions that his fight is not over. Now, what does he mean by that? Does he have a potential race in mind? that he wants to maybe throw his hat into. So I put this out on Twitter that I think Ojeda should run against West Virginia Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito. Now, Capito is one of these very standard, run-of-the-mill Republicans that she's completely owned by her donors. Much like most Republicans, or I would say all national Republicans and most Democrats, they all just answer to their donors, and Capito is no different. So I did a little research into her and found some interesting things. Let's go over it. So first, here are the her source of funds for her last race in 2014. The majority of her contributions came from large individual contributors and PAC contributions, and only got 4.59% from small individual contributions. Now, that number is tiny, especially when you look at someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, who get well over 50% of their contributions from small individual donors. But who exactly are her big donors here? So here you see the top five. We have Citigroup, Elliott Management, which is a hedge fund management firm, Goldman Sachs, of course, all banks here. And then you have at the top Sullivan and Cromwell. Now, Sullivan and Cromwell is a New York law firm and lobbying group. Now, check out this reporting from The Hill from 2014. One of Capito's most high-profile financial services regulatory political fights was in 2011. As chairwoman of the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Financial Institutions and Consumer Credit, she introduced legislation that delayed the implementation of a final rule on swipe fees, legislation that Wall Street backed heavily. The 2010 Wall Street Reform Act, also called Dodd-Frank after its authors, gives the Federal Reserve authority to regulate how much money banks collect each time consumers swipe their debit cards. During the 2012 campaign cycle, Capito's largest campaign donor came from Sullivan and Cromwell employees, who contributed $48,500, according to public records. Sullivan and Cromwell is a corporate law firm and has registered lobbyists. That was more than triple the amount that Sullivan and Cromwell employees gave to anyone else in a House race during the 2012 cycle. Now get this. About 2 months before introducing the credit swipe legislation, Capito hired Dan Casto, an attorney from Wall Street lobbying group Sullivan and Cromwell, to be her legislative director. So let me break down the timeline here. In 2011, Capito hires someone from Sullivan and Cromwell, this Dan Casto guy. This Dan Casto guy becomes her legislative director, who then clearly pushes the credit swipe legislation that favors Wall Street. And then a year later, in 2012, Sullivan and Cromwell become Capito's largest donor. And again in 2014, become Capito's largest donor. So this is straight up revolving door politics. This is all of this is legal, but it's exactly what is wrong with Washington. These big moneyed interests get their employees onto the payroll of these various politicians, and then have those employees do their bidding from within Washington. This is all legal and all completely disgusting. And it's the exact kind of thing that Richard Ojeda would be fantastic at calling out. This is a guy, again, who has been so strong fighting with unions, has pushed away any big donor money, has only been about grassroots support and small individual donations, and it would be the perfect voice to go up against Capito in 2020. Now imagine if he were to actually win this seat and become a senator in West Virginia, and you have Ojeda, who is, representing unions and the regular people, and then you have Joe Manchin, who is representing everything wrong with Washington. And when West Virginia sees what they can have with Ojeda, and then compare that to their other senator, Joe Manchin, I mean, it would only be a matter of time until someone else challenges Joe Manchin, and then Joe Manchin's out of there. So Ojeda, I really hope, takes a hard look at this race, because again, this is also, an election happening in 2020. He can move on the same path. All it does is, or all he would have to do is kind of just cut down a little bit on the exposure he has. So instead of going for the presidential exposure and going down that route, if all he's doing is challenging a senator in West Virginia, he has the potential to get even more airtime that way, as there's not going to be the same kind of, focus and or competition around a race in West Virginia as there obviously will be for a presidential race in 2020. So I really hope Ojeda does this, but we're going to have to wait and see.